that a yes?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
okay. All right. So welcome everybody to Passive Cash Flow for Life. Some of you are new and some of you have been back several times. So kudos to everybody for being here tonight. As you may or may not know, Passive Cash Flow for Life has been around for, well, Nichole has been teaching this. Well, let me give you this. Nichole's been doing commercial real estate for about 25 years, has several thousand doors in about 11 different states. And about 10 or 11 years ago, she decided that she wanted to give back. And so she put together this 4-day intensive, 12 hours a day almost, it seemed like, class. And she'd been teaching it. And then I took the class a little while ago and I was like so impressed and what she'd been able to accomplish and the way she taught and stuff like that, that we ended up partnering on some things. And right before COVID, we decided to take the 4-day live class because it's exhausting for Nichole. It's a lot of work. And actually take it and put it online. The other reason for putting it online, that even after 4 days of 10, 11, 12-hour days, it was only half the material that you really wanted to teach. So she felt, okay, great. So we had 30, 35 hours worth of material. Now we're going to put it online, and now we have 60 hours worth of material. So she rebuilt the entire thing from top to bottom. We edited it, we put it together. So it's all online now at Passive Cash Flow for Life. Just if you're not aware, if you've been to or are a student now and have joined the online community, this is kind of a once a year, once every couple of years, we're actually going to do one 4-day live event in Baltimore at the Best Western Conference Center. It's going to be November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So if you're a student, fantastic. If you're not a student, when you sign up to be a student, you get that included as well as part of the package. But obviously, we have a limited amount of seats because the conference room, or not conference room, I guess the ballroom is only so big. So if you have an interest, you want to make sure you get a seat, just go to passivecashflowforlife.com. And I'll also put that in the chat later on. So today we're going to talk about land trust, the third part. So Nichole, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, you guys. So I'm getting over a cold, so I'm telling you if I cough or sneeze or something like that, please forgive me. So I want to just start out. This is kind of the third part of what we've talked about with land trusts. So what I want to do is to kind of go back and kind of hit the core concepts again, just briefly, and then we'll pick up on these other things that you can do. So a land trust is nothing more than it's a type of a trust that holds real property, meaning an actual piece of property. And it is like any other trust. There is a trustee that is assigned who actually owns, because you are going to deed the property to the trustee. And so the trustee actually has ownership. They have the deed and they have equitable title to the property. The trust works by having a trust agreement that lines out what the trustee can and can't do, who the beneficiaries are, what their rights are, etc. So the other kinds of key things that I think there's some pretty big misunderstandings in some areas about trusts, in that some people say that a trust, that you should put everything in a land trust because it protects you. The fact of the matter is, what a land trust does is give you privacy. It does not protect the asset at all. If a court or tells your trustee to say who the beneficiary is, then it falls right down to you. So if there's a suit, the trustee is not going to be held accountable. It's going to be the beneficiary. And so how we actually hold land trusts, the beneficiary of a land trust is some kind of an entity, like an LLC, a corporation, something like that, a limited partnership. So the other thing that is important to understand about just land trusts in general is that I said at the very beginning, a land trust can only hold real property. So if the beneficiary of a land trust, an LLC or a person, then what they actually have, that their beneficial interest is actually held in a personal property trust. That's important to know because that is a big benefit if somebody owns properties in more than one state and you live in another state when it comes to wills and probate. What we talked about last time was some of the things that you can do with a land trust that makes it a really good thing to think about. And one of them is if even in community property states and marital states, in most cases, if the beneficial interest in a trust is to another person or to another LLC, the spouse has no right to that. So in the case of divorce, it's a way of protecting assets a little bit. Although there are some states that probably wouldn't work in, but most it will. The other thing is that it is protections in some ways against judgments and liens, in how you can actually attach a property to a judgment or a lien. And so there are some real benefits to having land trusts and those kinds of things. So the legal title empowers going to let the trustee do anything they want to with the trust, including sell the property. And you probably can't do much about it. That's why the trust agreement is so important. I've seen some trust agreements online that are a page and a half or 2 pages, and people are selling those as what you should use. Good trust agreements are 8-10 pages and have a lot of detail in them to protect both the trustee and the beneficiary. So it's just like if you think about it in a way, it's sort of like a contract, although you need to spell things out a lot more. So with a good trust agreement, you may not be able to have a trustee prevent them from selling the property out from under you, but you would have rights in terms of courts to get your at least the money back and stuff like that. So you could sue them. But that also says we really need to you need to appoint a trustee as someone you can trust because of this, right? So equitable title is the right to acquire a full legal title. So for instance, it's a right. So if you sign a sales contract where you're selling your house, say, right? And both of you sign the contract, the person you're selling the house to now has equitable title to your property. They have a right to buy that property. And so when we say a trustee has both legal and equitable title, That's what equitable title means. I don't think a lot of people really understand what equitable title means, right? Typically, trustees, what they can do is they can sign for loans, they can open bank accounts, they can pay bills for the trust, those kinds of things. Their duties and responsibilities are set out in the trust agreement, right? So those are some of the core things. Now I want to move on and talk about three different kinds of, or two or three other things that we didn't talk about that are things you can do in a trust. Okay, so if your trust agreement, you can appoint somebody as a director of the trust. Right? Think of a director as, well, if you have a minor as the owner of a trust, as the beneficiary of a trust, the minor can't make decisions for that trust. And so the most common ways you see directors assigned in trusts is with minors. And they are assigned as a director to act as the benefit for in making decisions for the beneficiary, right? But other ways that you could use directors for a land trust is if you have somebody who has no experience with property. You could then make a director a property manager or somebody that does have that experience that can make those decisions. You would assign a director for somebody who is who has some mental incapacitation to make decisions for them. You can, the beneficiary typically is the person who forms the trust and forms the trustee and then signs it over. So the beneficiary can also assign a director if they wish to have somebody with more expertise manage the trust, or if you decided you want to retire to Tahiti for the next 2 years and you don't want to be bothered, then you can have a director to make those decisions, right? But it needs to be expressly identified in the powers of the trustee in that trust agreement. Right. So let's talk about minors now. And these are a couple of things that I don't think people understand about minors and contracts and stuff. Kids can own property in their own name, but there's a practical problem when signing contracts, etc. Minors can actually sign a contract in most states, but when they turn 18, they can turn around and rescind that agreement in most states if they choose to. So most buyers won't sign a contract with a minor, nor should they. So in land trusts, you can avoid this issue again by assigning a director who is going to direct the trustee to sign contracts and stuff and to make decisions for the minor. All right, so now let's talk about just another little thing about choosing a name for your trusts. So a lot of people, one of the things that's taught out there a lot is to put every property in a separate land trust, right? And you're going to name them the same. So there are many ways to name trust, to choose a name for a trust. And here are a list of some of them. You can use a former owner, you can use a street address, you can use something that sounds like a bank or a government agency. The key here is to not name not use the same naming convention for every trust. So if you are always naming a land trust as the address of the property for say, so it's the 234 Park Street Trust, and then it's the 81012 Avenue Trust. If somebody goes looking for in the property records to see who owns a certain property, attorneys are always looking, or people who are looking for a possibility of suits, etc., are always looking to see if they can figure out what assets you have. And if you have the same naming conventions for every trust you have, it's fairly easy to maybe consider that it's the same beneficiary for each of these trusts. So my only point here is that you really want to use different naming conventions. People say, well, if I do that, I'm not going to remember if I have too many trusts. Well, that may be true, but so it's your decision what you want to do. I would rather have something on a piece of paper in my computer that says what the property address is and what the name of the trust is. Okay. So here is a potential trust. James Ray, this is how it would show up in the land records. James Ray, J. Ray, as trustee of the 123 Land Trust dated June 15, 2022. All right. And so what we're doing here by using a initial or is that we're making it a little bit harder. There's more than one J. Ray out there, right? And so it's just making it a little harder for people to try and figure out who actually is the trustee. The word land trust does not actually have to be in the name. But if you're getting pushback, you can also put something in a personal property trust. The issue is that a lot of times the courts, not the courts, the people who do the land records, the property records, don't know about land trusts or property, personal property trusts, and they are maybe not quite so willing to put something in the name of a personal property trust. It doesn't sound like a land trust. Now, backing up for just a minute. If you own, so let's take this gentleman who's on the call, I forget his name, who is from Connecticut and is a partial owner of a fairly good sized property. If he owns that property with other investors, then he would set up his land trust as for his part ownership in the LLC. So you would have something. So most of the time, let's just say my property is my big property is in Florence, South Carolina. And I own 20% of that LLC. And the LLC just holds that one property. My company owns part of that LLC. So my land trust that I'm going to set up for my partial ownership is actually a personal property trust that I would say James Ray as trustee of the Florence, South Carolina property dated on such and such. So is my equitable interest or my ownership interest in the trust held by? So you just want something to be able to keep your privacy, but you can do land trusts um, in properties that you don't own the whole of. You just have to title it a little bit differently. And you have to have your ownership interest in some kind of an LLC that can be the beneficiary of the trust you're setting up. All right. All right. So let's kind of talk about this. So let's talk about beneficiaries for a minute, right? So a beneficiary can be anyone. It can be a person, it can be a minor, it can be a entity. And my advice, my personal advice, and I will tell you, I am not a lawyer and I am not an accountant, but from what I have seen, is that you want to not be personally responsible for anything if you can get away from it. So I've been at this about 25 years. And if you're at this for a while, I can almost guarantee that at some point somebody's going to try and sue you. So owning the beneficial interest of a land trust in your own name, if somebody sues and gets to your name, that everything that you own in your own name is up for grabs. And attorneys can get at it, which is why we use entities, right? If you are going to be doing something complex that's not typical, I would actually consult with an attorney, somebody who actually knows how to do trusts, land trusts, and other kinds of trusts. And so we have, if anybody's interested at some time, we have a couple of attorneys that are pretty expert in doing land trusts and non-revocable, revocable trusts in terms of wills. And so they are both investors in real estate, and their practice in law has to do with estates and estate planning. All right. One of the things we talked about last week was to make sure that you name a successor beneficiary in your trust agreement. All right. So those of you who know anything about wills, that if you have a will, as opposed to a trust, if anything you own or you put into a will that somebody's going to inherit is caught up in the probate, and everything tends to be frozen for a year to 18 months to 2 years. And so if you have a couple of investment properties and you have them in an LLC, but you don't have actually a trust, you are using a will, that property is going to get caught up in probate. And if you have properties in more than one state, then you're going to be opening probate in more than one state if it is actually a piece of real property. So one of the things we really want to do if we're going to do land trusts is to have a successor beneficiary named in your trust agreement. Because if anything happens to you, then the beneficial interest automatically and immediately moves to the successor beneficiary, and it does not get caught up in probate. Now, you may have to find yourself going to court or a hearing to to make sure that gets clear. But trusts are not typically, particularly if the trust is funded, are not caught up in those probate issues. So if you're going to do land trust, make sure you have a successor beneficiary. And here's a couple of examples. Okay, so the individual, one thing, I have a couple of examples here. Whoops, I'm sorry. Is Kathy Corley as to 100% for the beneficial interest here under. Okay. Another one, successor. Upon the death of the named beneficiary, Kathy Corley shall become the primary beneficiary of the trust. That makes it real clear who is a successor beneficiary. You can, in your trust agreement, set up joint ownership. So it makes it clear who has what percent and who has the right to make the decisions, right? And what type of co-ownership? Is it a partnership? Is it a tenants in common? It is a JV agreement? Is it an LP versus GP, limited partner? What is their interest? All of those things should be set up in your trust agreement, in your land trust agreement. Now I can see, almost hear a lot of people saying, oh, it's a lot of work to put a land trust agreement together. Well, it is for the first one. But after that, you can pretty much use the same template. But the first one I did, particularly if I have something that's not, that's a little bit more complex, I would certainly get the help of an attorney for the first one. All right, so let's talk about who are the best beneficiaries. And here's just kind of a list of people, right? So the fourth bullet I want to talk about here for just a minute, which is a land trust cannot hold interest in another land trust. So that's why a land trust holds interest, or the beneficiary is a personal property trust, or it's an LLC. A personal property trust is a beneficial interest of a land trust. So it's just another layer of protection. So you can have more than one personal property a trust if you want to. I think sometimes that may be overkill unless you really have a huge property or something very complex going on. So for exemption, this is one of mine, M&A Investments Holdings, LLC, a Maryland limited liability company, as to 100% of the beneficial interest here under. So that really just is an example of how my, now I have a revocable trust, but I also have some properties and a person in a land trust. And this would be my my main holding company is the beneficial interest of the LLC, of the land trust, for one of my properties. All right, so I think those are the main things I want to. So, oh, this is the last slide I want to talk about here about other things that can go in personal property trusts, right? So they're built on a lot of the same concepts of land trust or a living trust or a revocable trust. So what it means basically is that anything that is not real property, that is not a piece of land or can be held actually in a personal property trust. And here are just some examples of things that can be in a personal property trust. So you can set up personal property trust. If you were to have a big antiques collection that you thought maybe some heirs were going to get fighting over, or you had a you know, you name it, you had kind of old cars that were worth a lot of money. You could consider putting those in personal property trusts and naming the beneficial interest, the beneficiary of that personal property trust. And like anything else that's in a trust, if the trust is funded, so the trust actually owns the cars, they own the bank account, they own the antiques, then you don't end up having to have that go through probate, which means the asset is not frozen, which means you don't get into arguments about who gets what. It is there in the trust agreement. So I guess the last thing, that's kind of the last thing I want to talk about with these kind of trusts, um, is to understand that some of the benefits of land trusts and personal property trusts is not that it's going to protect the property from suit, because they don't. They protect from, they help you with maintaining your anonymity and with privacy, but they don't protect the asset. They also don't shield assets from a lot of legal potentials like a personal property trust or a land trust can do. So I want to kind of move on here with this last thing. The last thing I want to talk about just real quickly before we turn to answering some questions. Sorry. Is this first, if you want to know more about what we do and learn a little bit more about different aspects of commercial multifamily investing, we've done a webinar. That's the Passive Wealth webinar. It's free, and that's the address for it. If you are thinking that you might be interested in coming to this 4-day class, I'm sort of giving you a hint here. If you go and look at this webinar and sign up at the end of the webinar, you get another $500 off of the class. So if that's something that may pique your interest, I would suggest you go, if you want to save yourself some money, think about going in this way. PassiveCashFlowForLife.com is our website. Support, if you want to talk to, get a message to James or me, send an email to support@PassiveCashFlowForLife.com. All of these Teaching Tuesdays we put up on our YouTube channel, and those generally go up on Thursdays. And any of you who are on our email list or have come to this thing will get an email that tells you that the Teaching Tuesday has been put up on our YouTube channel, but that's our YouTube channel list. Every Tuesday we have at 6:30 we have a call for on multifamily, generally about half an hour, and then we take questions. And then at 7:30 we work with partners who do residential real estate investing, which we still do too, and they're going to talk about topics related to real estate investing in the residential. So next week we in commercial are going to talk about going to go through kind of a case study of how we found and looked at and acquired one of my more recent properties. And I think that our friends and colleagues over in the residential world are actually walking you through in several Teaching Tuesdays of a property they're just starting to rehab, and they're going to walk you through finding it, rehabbing it, scopes of work, those kinds of things. And at that point, James, if you got anything else that I didn't say here that I should have?
No, not at all. For any of the students that are on, we're sending out messages. So you guys obviously get a huge discount. And then if you refer somebody, then you get to come for free. And I'm going to go ahead and put all the links into the chat. If you guys just want to click on them, or if you want to just cut and paste, it's up to you.
So the people who get to come free are current students if they want to come back for a replay, right?
No, that's not what we talked about, but we can talk about it offline, and make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, yeah, I think we need to.
Okay,
I thought, well, I thought we talked about giving people a discount, but if they haven't already bought the course and been to the class, then, well, we'll talk about it.
okay.
All right, so I'm going to turn this back. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and we are going to open this up to questions. So please feel free to ask any questions there. I see Jane and Sharon, who are our residential partners. So anybody else, please feel free to ask questions.
Hey, Nicole, I have a question. Like, so did you say like the assets in the personal property are not protected against litigation? Are they? Are
Okay.
they not?
Okay. So if you are, if you have a how to say this, if you have a land trust, then the beneficiary of the land trust is generally an LLC, right?
Yeah.
And your ownership in the LLC is personal property now because you
Yeah.
actually, okay. So in the case of other assets that you may want to protect from, you know, in case of you want to direct where they go in case something happens to you, then they are if it's something isn't held in an entity of some sort that's considered a separate person, then no, it is not, it generally doesn't have liability protection, which is why we say in a land trust, the beneficiary of a land trust is an LLC as opposed to an individual. Now, just a personal property where if you're going to put cars, because
Yeah.
you want to say who's going to inherit those have never been protected unless you hold them in some kind of an entity, corporation
Okay.
or something. They've never been protected from liability. So if you get, if you hit somebody, and for whatever reason, your insurance doesn't cover it all, then whoever is suing you can go after other assets you have.
So even though they are in the personal trust,
Yeah,
it's like such a bank account.
yeah, personal property trust is so kind of, let's kind of see how I'm going to say this. What makes an LLC different or a corporation different from a person is that the courts view it as a separate person. They actually view it as a separate person. It is not you, it is another person. And so if you have a property in an LLC, then and something happens on that property, then all the attorneys can go after is what that other person, e.g., the LLC, owns. It cannot go after you personally. But a personal property, if you just are putting something in a personal property trust, that is not kind of an LLC or some entity, then yes, it is not protected. It is it is yours and it is part of your person. So it isn't a separate person in the eyes of the courts.
I see. Okay. But how do like, for example, the bank accounts and all, who have wealthy assets, like maybe personal with a lot of cash or cash related securities? How do they protect, if I may say, do they put it into LLC, or there are there different mechanisms? The reason I
Well,
ask is, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
okay, so I don't know what all of the variations are. I can tell you that I have some stock accounts that are held in an LLC. I have some stock accounts that are held in IRAs. And so I try and keep everything out of my name. But I actually have a living revocable trust, and every asset I have is actually deeded to that trust. So I don't own anything. My trust owns everything. So if you have big bank accounts, and you have big stock accounts, and you have property, and you have other things, then I would suggest that you start thinking about a living trust, a living revocable trust to put all those assets in, because now they're part of your trust. But anything that is likely to have a high risk of being sued needs to be in a separate, something that is considered by the courts as a separate person, whether it be a LLC, a partnership, a corporation, whatever. So because stock accounts are not very often considered at high risk for somebody suing you for what you did in a related to the stock, then I don't have that in an LLC or something else. If you have a lot of assets, Roy, I would actually talk to a somebody who uses a lot of trusts and other mechanisms to protect assets. As a general rule, the for an asset to be separate from you and therefore protected, so that you aren't personally responsible, it has to be an entity that is separate from you, that it's considered by the courts to be a separate person. I don't know how to explain it any better. Jane,
Yeah. So,
or James,
but
have you got any?
No, I guess my recommendation, I think that trusts are very, very complicated. I had a really hard time understanding them. I still don't know all the ins and outs. If you want, we can give you the name of an attorney that actually specializes in trusts. I don't know, Roy, where are you? Local? Are you out in California or?
no, I'm in Virginia.
Okay, so this guy's in Kensington, Maryland. So what I'll do is I'll grab your email and I'll send his info over to you if you want to reach out to him. He's a great guy.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, other questions?
Charlene's
Other
asking, I'm sorry, did you catch, Charlene was asking, can a little bit different. So can a property that was not purchased in an LLC be later converted into an LLC?
Yes, it can. You are going to be, you may have to be, um, you may have to pay for some recording fees. But if you can show that you're doing it for asset protection or for things like that, it can be. But I would figure out, the first one at least, what's the best way to do that, because what you want to avoid is some of the high recording costs if they have to record it as a separate entity or whatever. So how do you set that up? But yeah, when I first bought things, I didn't know what I was doing, and I bought them in my own name and then had to convert them over to LLCs. So I know it can be done. So
Is there anything on the loan and the bank loan and that clause in there that you want to talk about or?
are you talking about
due on sale.
Yeah, no, the due on sale clause is, theoretically a bank could call a loan due, but you are not actually changing the ownership. You're not actually changing much other than you are putting it into an entity because it is an income producing property
Mm.
that you're trying to protect your asset. And most, particularly if you if you're working with, so when you go working with a bank or a savings and loan, you do not want to deal with the people who are setting up individual accounts. You want to talk to the person who's doing the commercial loans because they actually don't want you taking your property in your name. They want it in an entity. And so they're very aware of this and very open to that. It's just that a lot of times when we're getting started, we just go talk to the people who opens accounts and don't recognize that they don't really understand how we manage income producing properties. Does that answer that,
It does for me.
James?
Yeah, no, it does for me. Absolutely.
Yes, that was really good information. Thank you.
You betcha. Who's there? I see a blank. Well, I don't see a name. Who am I
it's
talking?
you don't see my name? It's Charlene.
Hey, Charlene. No, I don't see anything there. Do you, James?
I did earlier, yeah.
It's at
Okay.
okay.
Your box lights up, but okay, so that's great.
Yeah, her name's down in the bottom left-hand corner. The other ones are all in the middle for some reason, but Charlene is undercover, so hers is very small.
Secret agent.
All right. Any other questions?
I don't
Yes.
have a question. I have a comment. I just wanted everybody to know that what was the name of the last meeting that you had at Timbuktu? What do you call that meeting?
That's our
Fourth
our
Wednesday?
yeah, it's the fourth Wednesday. It's just a commercial meetup. It's just a networking, and then we generally have a little it's longer than these, but it's just a networking event, and we try and provide a little information, and it's a face-to-face thing that James also does, sends out live.
But I loved that case study that you made us do in teams. That was great.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're going to do another one next time. So at the meetup, the next time we're going to do are the 3 mobile home parks that we talked about.
Thanks, Charlene. We had a lot of really good feedback on that. People seemed, just like you, seemed to really enjoy it and got a lot out of it.
Definitely did.
So I would encourage anybody who's in the Baltimore, Washington area to come out and hang out with us. It's free. You just have to buy some lunch or some dinner there. So, and they have the best darn crab cakes in the area. Caitlin or Harold, do either of you have any questions?
No, I mean, that's pretty good. I learned a lot.
All right, great.
So Latanya and Roy, I just put the oops, sorry about that. I just sent it to you, Latanya. Hold on. I just put it in the chat for everybody. And maybe you know this. Latanya's asking if she has a property in Ohio. Is that something Brian could do as well, or maybe you could give her a referral?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because what you're really doing is are you looking for it as a to put in an entity or to do a trust, something like that? Latanya?
You can just, I think you might be on mute. Oh, maybe not. Maybe your mic's not working.
I'm sorry. So if it's an entity related kind of thing or a trust related thing, yes, Brian can do it. My trust attorneys have been doing it. I have properties in 11 states, so it's a matter of setting up the trust and then getting the trust funded. And what they tend to do, what attorneys will do, is write letters and things like that to whoever needs to get it to get the trust funded correctly. Okay, so what is the information
I'll
for
put
the
that in there for the
in-person
meetup.
meetup?
Can you look right above it to Latanya's follow-up question?
Here is the info for the trust. I don't see what you're talking about, James.
I have a home and want to put it and future properties into a trust.
Are you talking, I can't, are you talking a land trust? Nod or shake your head. Or a land trust?
I think she's typing. So she says if
What
that is the best vehicle, so I guess she's asking what you think the best vehicle is overall.
What I wouldn't do is it in your own name right now? Okay, that's the big issue. Get it out of your own name. The first thing to do to actually have protection, liability protection, is an LLC. So in my mind, an LLC comes before a land trust. And putting something into an LLC is something that most any attorney can do. You can do yourself, but an LLC should be in the state where the property is located, probably. And so you might want an attorney there, but most any real estate attorney should be able to help you set up an LLC. So should your accountant or bookkeeper should be able to help you set up an LLC in another state. Were you going to give the information, James, about the in-person meetup?
Yep, I'm looking it up right now just so I can cut and paste.
Okay.
Here we go.
Well, while he is working to try and find that, I'm going to just sort of say that I think our time is coming to an end, and I'm going to turn this over to Jane and Sharon, who are somewhere